What's going on, guys? It's Picsoleated, and today we are taking a look at something that might be considered a little controversial of a decision by a big gaming console brand, and that is the Nintendo Switch OLED by Nintendo. Okay, controversial might be a little strong of a word. Let's think of it more of something that is confusing, but understandable, I guess. It's confusing because, let's be honest, we were all expecting the Switch Pro, a beefed out, performance-heavy Nintendo Switch that could probably produce 4K resolution on your TV, but instead we got this, and it really threw everyone for a spin. It was probably the biggest curveball announcement in gaming in 2021. The hype buildup in the rumor mill was insane. Everyone was convinced we were getting the Switch Pro with that 4K resolution output. But the more I take this thing in, the more I'm really learning to appreciate what we did get. So you're gonna get my first impressions and what you really need to know about the Nintendo Switch OLED. Now, before we get started, make sure to hunker down on that like button. If you enjoy the video at any point, make sure to nudge that subscribe button. It helps the channel out a lot. And make sure to ring the notification bell for future videos. Now, I do own the original Switch, but I don't have it on me. It's somewhere else right now, so I can't really do a comparison for you. But if that's something you want to see, let me know in the comments. I can release a future video on it. As you can see, we've got the PS Vita with the OLED screen for comparison in the B-roll. So we're going to go over a few things, but first I really want to talk about the differences in the new Nintendo Switch OLED. The first thing you'll probably notice right off the bat is if you've owned a previous Switch or just seen the box in a retail store or online somewhere, the box itself is redesigned. Instead of being wide, it comes in a more compact vertical packaging, and honestly, I prefer this. It's a small thing that probably won't matter to anyone once you take the Switch out of the box and store the box somewhere, but it's a nice little detail and I can appreciate it. It's just one of those things, you can store this box more easily just because of the shape, and it just seems more economical. Now, the next most obvious change here I want to mention is the color combination. The default Switch colorway is the neon Joy-Cons, but with this one it is white, all white and black. Now, the original Switch came with the neon Joy-Cons, the red and blue Joy-Cons, and it came in an all black variant. The default color combination for the Nintendo Switch OLED is the white and black, but it also comes with the neon Joy-Cons as well, so sure, there's a little bit of overlap here, but the people who are going to buy the Switch OLED, I'm sure they're going to want to differentiate a bit from the original Switch just to show that it's the more premium version, so this is probably going to be the more popular colorway. Now, the next thing with the Nintendo Switch OLED is the buttons up top. They're a little more recessed, a little more refined compared to the original. The volume rocker here doesn't pop out as much. It's not difficult to press or anything, but it doesn't pop out as much. Same with the power button. It's been a little more recessed, I think. Its shape is a little bit different too. But the biggest change here is the game card flap. It is a little more controlled as opposed to the one that's on the original Switch. I believe they've reduced the size of the gap on the flap to open up the game cartridge slot. It's not too difficult to open for me by any means, but it might be a minor nuance. It might be a minor annoyance to some people. Another change with the Switch OLED is that it's actually slightly bigger than the original Switch. It's not by a lot. It might be by a few millimeters, like 3 millimeters or so. It's a little wider, but what it does mean is that your current Switch accessories might not fit. I've heard people online talking about the original Switch cases not fitting, or if they do fit, it's just a really tight fit, and that's probably not something you want to do with your Switch. There might also be certain accessories that extend from one side of the Switch to the other, like a grip or something, that might not fit as well. So you have to take that into consideration. You might have to get the Nintendo Switch OLED version of those accessories, which may come out a little bit later, so keep that in mind. Another change with the Switch is the speaker grill has been recessed, and apparently it's been improved from the previous Switch. However, if you're picky about audio, built-in speakers just aren't going to do you service in any way. You're going to want to switch to a headset regardless. However, any improvement over the original is a welcome improvement. I do notice with this Switch, when I do have it on a stand and I have it sitting on a table, it's much louder than when I'm holding it in my hands, and that's just because the audio is bouncing off whatever surface the Switch is sitting on, and the speakers being recessed more to the back is definitely enhancing that result. Again, it's not a game changer, but if you are going to offer a more premium version of the Switch, a more luxurious version with a higher premium cost, then this is a step in the right direction. Another design change here, the micro SD card is now under the stand to the left instead of at the bottom. This is considered a positive change since now you're less likely to accidentally click the card out from the bottom and have it fall to the ground, which is basically the middle of oblivion for something as small as a micro SD card. I personally don't think this is a common occurrence, but I can see the possibility of it happening, and I'm sure it legitimately happened to few, if not several people. So this is definitely a welcome change. Is it a game changer? No pun intended. Maybe not. Is it something I would ask for if I asked Nintendo for a super upgraded Nintendo Switch? Probably not the first thing or even the last thing on my mind, but that's why they're the pros and they have a design team that figures these little nuances out, and so they can give us the features that we don't deserve but we need. Speaking of which, we have one of the most noticeable differences. It is this rear stand right here. It has been upgraded from a mere single angle bicycle kickstand style stand to something that is more robust. It goes all the way from one side of the Switch to the other, and it can go into multiple angles. It now looks and feels like one of those stands that are on the Microsoft Surface. The angle range here is insane. You can almost go full 180 with this. Now don't attempt to go full 180 because you will break the stand, but you can go pretty close. It swivels out to a multitude of angles, and if you're worried it'll slide out of its current position, trust me, you got nothing to worry about. This thing is built strong and sturdy. Now those are sort of small quality of life upgrades that are included in the Switch OLED model, but in my opinion there are only two key differences that should really affect your decision whether the Nintendo Switch OLED model is right for you. Now I was going to include the rear stand upgrade on this list, but I realized you shouldn't be making your decision to upgrade from the original Switch to the Nintendo Switch OLED solely based on the rear stand upgrade. Okay, now back to the big two key differences. The first, well, I mean it's in the name, is the bigger, brand new, beautiful OLED screen. And if you're curious what makes an OLED screen better than an LCD screen, OLED screens are basically lit on an individual pixel basis, whereas LCD screens are backlit using several panels. This means that blacks on an LCD screen are never truly black, as there will always be light bleeding into them from other parts of the scene on the same panel. With OLED, because each pixel is lit individually, the blacks are always richer as there is no backlight bleed, and in my opinion this is always the best way to view any type of content. The second biggest difference here is the inclusion of the Ethernet port on the dock. Now before we get into this, can we please take a moment just to appreciate the design upgrade of the dock itself. When I first watched the Switch OLED unveiling, the main thing that stood out to me was the dock, as weird as it is to say. Now for one, it stood out to me because it's white and black, or black and white, whatever, same thing. And that appeals to me because it goes perfectly with my entire desk setup. The theme of my desk setup, it's all black and white. But two, because it clearly looked much different than the original. You could tell they really put some thought into redesigning it. Now, while the Switch OLED itself has the biggest upgrade here, which is the OLED screen, at face value, design-wise, it doesn't look that much different. And the original dock, while it did the job well, the build quality was fine, there was nothing really wrong with it. This redesign makes you realize just how much of an eyesore that original dock really was. Okay, so back to the Ethernet port. Now, it may not be a game changer for people who play single player or handheld all the time, but those competitive Smash players are gonna be frothing at the mouth for this upgrade. If you know anything about online competitive multiplayer, Ethernet ports are the holy grail of low latency, fair online competitive play. With wireless connectivity, there can be some interference or there can be more possibility for lag, but with a wired connection, there is no chance for interference from other wireless frequencies. Now, both of these upgrades kind of come with a caveat and kind of work against each other in my opinion, because the only reason you should be getting this Switch OLED is if you're going to play handheld a lot, because in that case, you're going to get a lot of benefit from that OLED screen. There are a lot of people out there though that only play their Switch docked, or most likely 99% of the time play their Switch docked on a TV screen, and for them this upgrade won't really be worthwhile. On the other hand, if they are Super Smash players or any other competitive online players, they have a lot to gain from the Ethernet port functionality, but in order for them to use it, they have to dock the Switch, which means sayonara, beautiful OLED screen, see you never. And of course, you could be that person that does play handheld a lot but only docks to play Smash. You can definitely be in that in-between category. I'm certainly a handhelder, and after seeing this beautiful OLED screen, it's going to be hard for me to switch back to the original Nintendo Switch. Now, you might have thought we were finished, but wait, there's a third upgrade. Okay, it's not really an upgrade, but if you're someone like me who takes aesthetics into account, and I know a lot of you do, I've seen your battle stations, you cable management and RGB gladiators, and if the looks of your electronics matter just as much as the performance, then the black and white color combination that comes standard with the OLED Switch may be a factor in whether you want to buy this thing or not. For someone like me, as I've mentioned before, I've carefully curated my desk setup to follow a black and white themed pattern, which is easy enough to do with accessories like speakers and headphones, because there's so much variety nowadays for those types of things. Even PC cases, it's not as easy to do with gaming consoles, just because gaming consoles usually come out in one colorway, would be lucky to get them in two. Then again, there's always those special edition colorways that come out once in a while, but if you're an early adopter like me, I always get the thing that comes out first. So thankfully, fate was on my side this gaming console generation, and that goes for the Switch OLED as well. To be fair though, you could pull this off with the original Switch, just get white Joy-Cons and like white vinyl stickers to put on the dock or something like that, but it's just that much easier when the default colorway out of the box is a black and white colorway. Okay, so we've talked about the key big differences and the key big upgrades with the Nintendo Switch OLED. Now let's talk about things that haven't changed. The first big thing that you should really know about is the performance. The performance is nearly identical, and Honestly, I shouldn't even say it's identical. It's exactly the same. As far as I know, the performance-related internals inside the Switch have not changed. While we all want more performance from a Nintendo Switch, there is a downside to such a modification. You start to get into questionable territory with games when you start upgrading the performance of a console, because once devs start developing games for the upgraded console, the performance might suffer on the original device, or they might flat out not release the game on the original device, although that is probably the least likely scenario. If gaming has taught us anything, is that you can lower the visual settings and release a lowered, watered down version for the original device and get the full-fledged version on the upgraded device. Plus, it wouldn't be in their best interest to alienate a part of the market just by not releasing the game on a certain platform. The Joy-Cons, for better or worse, are the same. Now, I've mentioned this earlier in the video, but if you're looking for radically different design changes in the controllers or accessories that are related to controllers like the Pro Controller or the Joy-Cons, you're really not going to find much here. As with most main interactivity accessories for the Switch, in other words, all the controllers, they're all pretty much the same. Nothing's going to change there. That's obviously great because it means no cost to the consumer, and considering how expensive Joy-Cons are, I'm sure nobody really wants to be upset about that. Now, for me, my personal favorite upgrade on this device is the OLED screen easily. Not only is it beautiful, it's bigger, and on small devices we already get small enough screens, but when you give me a bigger screen on a small device, I'm going for that bigger screen every single time. My second favorite upgrade here is this stand right here. Most definitely, the single angle kickstand on the original Nintendo Switch left a lot to be desired, so I just accepted that single angle bicycle kickstand for what it was. But now that I realize that this is a possibility, I'm kind of wondering why we accepted that aged excuse for a stand to begin with. Stand is such a perfect upgrade. To me, it's a no-brainer. I thought there was a lot to be desired with the kickstand on the original Nintendo Switch, so I actually feel quite validated that they upgraded the stand to this. I'm still kind of baffled and wondering why they didn't include this on the original Nintendo Switch. Now, as much as I'm praising the OLED Switch, that doesn't mean that it doesn't come with some downsides. One of the biggest gripes I have with the Nintendo Switch is the placement of the USB-C port. Now, I get it, there isn't really much Nintendo can do with this because it's the easiest way to slide the Switch into a dock and have it connect right away, and it really only becomes a nuisance to the subgroup of people who use headphones that have a USB-C dongle, and I am in that subgroup because once you connect that USB-C dongle, sure, you can use it in handheld mode, but once you want to put it on a surface, you pull that stand out, you set it down, and now it's putting a lot of pressure on that USB-C dongle. Of course, the Switch itself is not that heavy, and most likely you'll be okay doing this. However, it's just not a good thing to do because it is possible over time you damage that USB-C dongle or you damage your USB port and the connectivity becomes less reliable. There are times it might disconnect and things like that. Excuse the lighting change, the sun is coming up. I do usually record these things early in the morning. However, I'm sure that list of USB-C headphone users is growing every day. So, and I get it, there isn't really another place to put the USB-C port, and I get it. I mean, the top of the Nintendo Switch is filled with pretty much everything. We have all the buttons, the vents, auxiliary port, and the game cartridge port. So there really isn't much space there, but I wish there was something we could do about this so that the USB-C dongle wasn't pressing against a surface when the Nintendo Switch was placed on a table or any other sort of flat surface. And to be fair, that's not a gripe with the Switch OLED, that's really just a gripe with all Nintendo Switches because the original Nintendo Switch has the same issue. My main gripe really with the Nintendo Switch is that we all pretty much got duped by Nintendo, and it's not even their fault. It's our fault for believing in the rumor mill and thinking we were going to get a Switch Pro. However, it's not a bad product, it's worth the money, it's just not what we expected. And finally, my other gripe really is that if we're going to get an upgraded Switch, at least give us better battery life. The battery life is pretty much exactly the same as the original Nintendo Switch. They haven't made any upgrades in that department. With all these other upgrades like the OLED screen, the revised stand, the revised design, and other parts of the Switch, just give us a better battery. We're paying more, we're paying premium. A longer lasting battery is always welcome in a device that lasts probably 4 to 5 hours max. So who's the Switch OLED really for? Well, here's what I think. You have to fit into two camps, but those two camps can't be mutually exclusive. You're either one of those people who plays handheld a lot, and that way you will get the benefit of the bright, beautiful, bigger OLED screen, or if you like to play online competitively, you're a Super Smash player or Mortal Kombat 11 player, and you don't mind playing docked, then you will get the significant advantages from the Ethernet port functionality on the dock. However, you can be a hybrid. You can be playing handheld when you want to play handheld, and for competitive games like Super Smash, you want to put it on the dock, you want to get that Ethernet port functionality, If you're one of those people, this is the right console for you. Now, those are the two camps, but obviously there's always a third, and this one is kind of an exception. These are the people who just want the latest, shiniest new thing that has all the features, and they don't mind paying premium for it. For those of you, you don't even need to watch this video. You know you're gonna get this thing regardless. It's probably already in your hands, or it's probably already on its way to you, so congrats. Now, many people will make an argument that if you don't already own a Switch, then it makes sense for you to get the Nintendo Switch OLED. But realistically speaking, if you're someone who's going to play the system docked all the time and you're a casual player, you're not going to play online multiplayer, or even if you are, or if you don't care to play it competitively, then you could still go ahead and you could save a lot of money just getting the original Switch. There's a $70 Canadian price difference between the OLED Switch and the original Switch, and if you're okay with looking into the used markets, you could probably find a Switch for much cheaper, because there are definitely going to be a lot of people who plan to upgrade their Switch to the Switch OLED and will be selling off their original Switch. Just think about that. That's a minimum $70 Canadian difference, which is at least one video game or a bunch of accessories, or you could just save that money to use in the future for whatever you want. The other upgrades are good quality of life upgrades, but they shouldn't be the sole reason for you to upgrade to the Nintendo Switch OLED or for you to buy the Nintendo Switch OLED. There you have it. Those are my first impressions and everything you need to know about the Nintendo Switch OLED. What are your thoughts on Nintendo's decision to release an OLED Switch? Was the whole OLED screen worth a brand new release? Were you hoping for a more performance-focused upgrade, a 4K Switch Pro if you will, or do you think Nintendo should have upgraded the Switch Lite to an OLED version? I've actually seen a few people mention that, because the Switch Lite is actually a handheld exclusive device, and this is considered a majorly handheld upgrade. Sound off in the comments. That's it from me. Follow me on IG at Picsoleated, Picsoleated. I'll catch you in the next one. Picsoleated has switched up.